date.
Yeah, I would, just a few points to clarify also. When we start talking about SFA and literacy, and I believe the board is recognizing this and commenting respectively there, and that is, we're not comparing apples to apples when we're looking at SFA, versus into reading or into literature. One's a whole school reform, meaning, that it includes many things, including a literacy component, which is a significant part of that foundation. But there is comparables with that specifically, to a literacy into reading. So just to make sure that we're always clear that it's not an apples to apples comparison, only in that literacy component. With that, and also in recognition that we had started previously with discussions over 2 pilots. Now discussions is whether or not we should continue or expand, or if not even all, in terms of what our solution might be here, proceeding to raise literacy rates. And so with that in mind, we're sending now, up to 20 people plus or minus to 2 sites, Steubenville, and you recall also Pittsburgh, Kansas was part of the initial site that we had also gotten involved in. 100 people participating in a session with them, and we extended that into the board meeting and had that exchange. Those are the 2 sites. I would take this time to also comment that we were planning to send to an Arizona site. That Arizona site is not using SFA except for preschool right now. So I don't know the reasons why they're not, but I will look into that and report that back. I just wanted you to be aware of that. The Pittsburgh site, though, what's probably parallels our demographics. It has about 10%, English language learners and about 20% Hispanic. So I think that there's some parallel there. We've engaged them at the beginning. I think they've been using SFA for 3 years. You might recall initially they had 4 elementaries, 2 were on SFA, 2 were on something else. New superintendent came in, got rid of that and replaced it with Wonders. Their scores didn't do well, and now all of a sudden they're back at all their elementaries with SFA. So they're back into that implementation. So we think that that's a good site.
Is there any way we could do a Zoom meeting with them like we did with the student group? Since they're,
I think that could definitely be beneficial. Even though the site thing, we recognize what happened when they came back from that site, and really to see something in hand. But again, the opportunity. Now we did have. They were.
I mean, I would, I'd encourage the teachers and ministers to go.
But, but no, I'd
like to be more.
I think that that's really good. I think what's the opportunity that we see here is that the increase. Exposure by that exchange has been really beneficial, to the extent that we haven't, we're not talking about 20 people who have done all the research, and then they come out and they try to share with us. It was getting a lot of people engaged.
Did we record that meeting?
I believe all the meetings that we've had so far are recorded.
So there was a meeting
with the Pittsfield people?
Yes.
Correct.
It was only the superintendent.
Okay.
And there
the
was
other ones had the principal and 2 principals and some teachers.
Yeah, right.
Correct.
But that was recorded.
Okay.
So
we can also share that. A potential another very, very willing to, and as we've seen, what's really been beneficial here is most of the exchanges has been more with the school sites using it than a representative of SFA, even though we've had that person there to answer technical questions or other things that may not have been answered. So what I'm really getting down to is, because of now this interest in looking at expanding an option, I'm also suggesting that the board would move their decision timeline back from January to February. So that's really my point here in surfacing this, because and also with some of the questions that have come up, we don't want to think we're doing anything but being open and wanting people to be engaged in this process and know as much as possible. So I think it would serve us all by doing that. So I would ask that you consider even taking action to say, let's move that timeline from January to February.
Does anyone want to make a motion
Yeah,
to
I'll move
that?
that we move the deadline from January.
I second it. Any discussion on that at all?
Oh, it's a good idea.
I think it's a good idea too, because it allows the public to see that we're putting in more time and effort into vetting it.
It builds buy-in too.
Yeah.
You know,
Right.
it's important.
And again, you know, what I surfaced, again, this is a whole school thing, so you're looking at more than just the literacy curriculum component.
Yeah.
You're seeing the other things regarding what does a whole school reform improvement model look like?
Well, I think the Kansas model is like, well, first of all, it's a better parallel. And secondly, I think the fact that they went off and then went back on is a real sort of like, okay, this is what happened. And this is, you know, this is why we're recommitted. It's pretty potentially persuasive.
I don't see any downside. I think it's a good idea to give it as much time as we need to work with
And
it.
again, we're doing that, see, we want any decisions we make, you know, the more you can start getting ready for the next year, even though the implementation is next year, anything that you start doing in this year that gets you ready for a transition, you know, to be successful, and that would be beneficial.
Yeah,
Pam, I know that, when, the ELA committee came forward, there was some professional development that the group was concerned about starting. Is there any problem with waiting for a decision to February?
No, I think in conversations with Jamie, the professional development that was planned for January and February was really just kind of getting a common understanding.
Like the science of reading? Okay,
So it really isn't tied to a resource at
Okay,
this point. So as long as we can, you know, get it organized and
Right.
coordinated,
okay,
it shouldn't matter in that.
okay. Okay, well, any other discussion? Oh, sorry.
yeah, I'd just like to say that my biggest concern is teacher fatigue with the curriculum. Hypothetically, I don't want to roll one thing out and then roll another thing out in a year after that. So like, I really want to be, I believe that we have one chance at this, and I don't want to say yes to one thing and then say yes to another thing, and then it just ends up hurting our teachers to try to absorb information in curriculum. And it's like, we need to kind of be united. So I think pushing this back is a necessary evil. However, I do believe that Lucy Calkins is crap. So like, we do understand that there's a problem, and we do want the success for all our students. However, I'm not going to just rubber stamp something right away because I think it's okay. So we really need to get this right. So I'm sorry that I can't vote on it right away, but we need to do our due diligence and make sure that if we do pick one, it's going to be systematically throughout our district, kind of, and I want our teachers to not get burned out, because that's one of the biggest complaints I've heard, is that they just keep picking new things and try to put out fires, and they just get wore out. So I don't want to wear them out any more than we already have.
That's exactly why I made the motion. We've talked about this before, about how, going through COVID and, doing in class and then virtual and making the adjustments to all of that, plus, changing the administration. I do think there's real weariness there. There's real road weariness there. And so I don't, I kind of agree that, I've had some reservations about trying this thing. But I think what Matt says is true. We got one chance. And we can't, and it's not gonna, it has to be given the best shot that it can get. And that is having teachers going in and saying, oh, thank God, we're gonna do something that's gonna work. We're gonna do something that's really positive. I'm feeling optimistic about this. That simultaneously regenerates the teachers as well as implements a program. I think right now there's a bit of a foreboding in the ranks, because it's like, oh God, another thing now, and it's a big one this time. And I think the opposition that we hear at meetings is pretty much generated by, oh my God, you know, another thing, another big ass thing. And I think that if we can actually build a sense of positive attitude and optimism, we're doing two things, important things simultaneously.
My last comment, if I can.
Oh, did I?
No, I don't. I just had a
Does it have to
final
do-
thought.
Does it have to do with a word?
Yes, cost.
Oh,
And leverage.
Yeah.
not harbor?
Nope, cost and leverage. I just want to, I mean, we got to do a due diligence here. If we can leverage the program in a certain way, if we present it to SFA or into reading at a scalable level, the cost is going to be different. So I'm looking at it from the lens of money and how we can allocate our funds correctly. So maybe we can leverage it differently, obviously, if we're going to do it for more sites or just 2, or if we're going to do into reading or not. So I want to see the cost analysis of it and how we can better get more leverage for a better position moving forward for the district. So them are my 2 points: teacher fatigue and the cost of the program.
Colin?
Yeah, I want to make sure that it's stated that the literacy program and the SFA program are actually 2 separate things. It's just the literacy program has the SFA program has a literacy component to it. It's a school reform program, and that is the scope of the job has changed, and that's one of the reasons that we are putting this forward. So I wanted to make sure that is very clear, that they are not the same in its proposal. So that's all I need to say.
Thank you.
Uh,
Tony?
Jim, could you speak to that a little bit more about some of those differences? Because I know you've mentioned that in the past.
Well, Success for All has a character education component. It has what they refer to as solutions committees, meaning that many of your initiatives may fail if you're not thinking about how it fits within the system and that system is integrated. So part of the research is identified what are those factors that research have demonstrated if you do this and do this well, you are likely to have upticks in your student achievement. Attendance, a simple one. If kids aren't coming to school, they're not learning. So this, using research and good practice, how do we get those kids there? First of all, it's very much a data-driven system. And that data-driven system says, don't just say you have an attendance problem. What's the problem specifically?
Yeah.
Is it across the grades? Is it the same thing for student involvement? The same thing for getting the community involved? It's all about data, in terms of what is it telling us? And then it breaks everybody in that school into teams, not only academic teams, these other teams. In many ways, we're already doing this. We just don't know if we're doing consistently, and to the same level. So we potentially could have a lot of variance in our system, because we've heard, sometimes while we might have a system, there's quite a lot of autonomy, it seems like. And we just discussed in terms of the implementing the code of conduct, inconsistent, and we really can't put our finger on there. So some of this is recognizing what happens then if everybody's doing the same thing and but a complete system. This is much more of a system approach, a systemic approach towards how all these things fit in that are key to contributing to teaching and learning and the elevation. I mean, one of the things you heard when the teachers came back, and I even remember talking to Lance. Lance, I think, was selling himself short of what the expectation could be regarding behaviors. When he came back and he said there were no behaviors, with some minor exception, and he recognized maybe I was expecting less, and so those component parts are part of that whole system. And it also has response to intervention built in. It recognizes that if kids aren't succeeding, they're going to get transferred over to special education. What is that tier 1? Those things are all built in, the character education, I mentioned. So many of these things have been thought about. They're important. We should integrate them in. So that's, and it's not that we aren't doing some. You think you heard the teachers coming back to say we were already doing some of this, but what they liked was it was consistent. So that's a little bit in terms of that clarification there.
Jamie, anything you want to add before we vote on this?
What I want to add is we're giving the opportunity to every school to send representation to look at the sites. So I'm thrilled with that. So all of our schools are going to have a team that gets to actually go and physically be on the ground to do some observation. I have asked Lance to be the facilitator in Ohio, and he's trying to clear his schedule to be able to do that. And I'll go with the group to Kansas. But I think it is important that we have other people putting their eyes on it so that the people in the building have trusted colleagues that have actually seen what happens and they can ask more questions.
Okay, thank you. Okay, well, if there's no other discussion, I'd like to vote on the motion that's on the floor, which is that the Success for All and the literacy curriculum update timeline for a decision from the board would be moved to the first meeting of February of the board of directors. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Okay, motion carries. Colin, were you an aye, just to make sure? You're muted.
Thank you. Yeah, I was an aye.
Okay, thank you. Okay, a couple new business items here that were brought forth from a personnel committee meeting that we had yesterday. The first one was a proposed title change of secretary to the superintendent and board of education to an executive assistant position. We had a first and second coming out of the committee. Mike, do you want to just give a little background about what we discussed yesterday?
Yeah, we, it's just one of those titles that really needs to be updated. I was in contact with 7 comparable school districts since we had the personnel committee meeting yesterday morning, and all 7, the position as an executive assistant to the superintendent and board of education. So, we would propose that we update the title of that position. And in addition, just so the board is aware, I'm also looking at those comparables relative to the possibility of an adjustment in the wages for that position.
Okay, excellent. Any questions, concerns, thoughts about that? Okay. All right, so seeing none, we have a motion and a second. All in favor signify by saying aye. Okay, any opposed? Okay, motion carries. The second new business is a proposed new clerical position reporting to the assistant superintendent of teaching and learning. And I'll have Mike address that as well.
Yes, we had 2 clerical positions resign recently in the teaching and learning department. As a result, we met and we talked about that, the executive team, and the decision to look at those 2 FTEs. The proposed decision for the board is that we would take those 2 FTEs. 1 FTE would be assigned to the assistant superintendent of teaching and learning, and the other FTE would be split to a 50-50 situation, a 0.5 FTE for the director of elementary teaching and learning, and a 0.5 FTE clerical position for the director of secondary teaching and learning. I also took a look at the costing of this whole reorganization piece relative to this clerical piece, and for the most part, it is pretty much cost neutral. So the 2 people that resigned were with the district quite a few years, so they were a little bit higher up on the pay scale. They were a full benefit package, and so I'm pretty confident that the cost is going to be pretty close to neutral.
Okay, so this was we had a motion and a second come out of committee. Any questions about this part of the reorganization? Yes.
I would just like to also say that, you know, a critical function of this too would be to back up Lori. And we don't currently have that, and that can be very challenging sometimes in terms of the expectations that we're putting on Lori, and her being able to take time off. And so it's always very important, I think, that you have enough redundancy in the system and backup that makes the quality of work life meaningful here. So I wanted to highlight that too.
All right. If there's no further discussion on that, we have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye. Any opposed? Okay, motion carries. And then our third new business item is a proposed new contract for the interim director of human resources. And this was also brought forward with a motion and a second. Mike, or I should say, Jim, we talked a little.
Essentially, just going back briefly, is, you know, I found it very challenging to find qualified candidates that I felt really good about, you know, for this position. Mike had approached me with seeing some of our postings and offered that he could assist. We did background checks on Mike, and he came nothing with high regard. And we said, geez, this could really work well with us to have an experienced person on board. And so we started with a part-time position, essentially. He immediately went to full-time. You know, so some of this is acknowledging what he's doing. You know, he's able, under the current law, to be able to work full-time. He's willing to do that. And so this, in many ways, is my having the position support what he's actually doing. We are paying him for the additional hours. But I think that this is the best way to proceed and handle this. We also looked in and engaged our attorney in terms of his contract. He actually resigns, similar to what you put into my interim. You know, we have some of that provision built into his. But before the end of the year, we will also look at posting the position, what are my options, you know, so that it was also thought that Mike will play a critical role in training the next person, depending on what that level of experience is. So we are not going to wait to the end of the year, because that's a busy time, you know, in terms of getting ready for the new school year. So we will be engaged in that, you know, at some point in time, you know, in terms of what are we doing for the future. But right now, it's most definitely, I'm very pleased. And I think, you know, I've gotten positive feedback from everybody in terms of that we're really not, things aren't falling between the cracks. We're taking care of things, and it's served us well. So I would ask for your support of doing this, because it's what we're actually doing.
So any further discussion, questions about the interim contract? Okay. Seeing none, all in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Okay, motion carries. Okay, and then our other new business is coming from the curriculum committee that we just had. There are 2 out-of-state travel that were brought forward, and one of them is the LHS robotics team will be going to Duluth, Minnesota, March 1st, 23 through March 5th, 23. And the only cost that, for those of you that were not at the meeting, since it just happened, we don't have minutes to look at. The only thing that cost was for the substitute teacher, and I believe it was $900. Yeah. Is that what it was? For our students to go. There's been an uptick in students coming back to the robotics program, which is a good STEM program. And it came out of committee first and a second to go ahead and make the recommendation to send the students to go to Duluth. So any questions about that at all?
I just want to add that it's 25 to 30 students are going, because we don't have the minutes for that for people who may be watching this meeting. So, yeah,
perfect. Thank you. Colin.
Yeah, I just want to state that, you know, these robotics programs are awesome. I don't know if you've ever had the opportunity to see them. They even had a Netflix special on some of these things, and they are, I'll date myself in my use of words here, but they're rad. They are It is, I mean, it is so cool what they're doing. And with the way that our future's headed, you know, we have automation for so many things in oh man, it's everything's going automation. This is definitely the type of stuff we want to be really putting out there for us to stand apart as a district. So I'm super proud of this type of endeavor in our community. I know they have all different grade levels that can get involved in that. And it really teaches some team building to some kids that might not necessarily have participated in team activities sometimes even. So my kid was they took a crack at doing some of that stuff in the lower levels, and they enjoyed it a lot. So great program.
Thanks, Colin.
I also work in robotics as well, as part of my job with Parker, and it's a growing field. Everything is going to robots, I mean, especially with the decline in employment and stuff. A lot of people are trying to figure out ways to put robots in those positions. This is a huge thing to keep kids interested in, and the employment opportunities are going to be endless for them if this is the direction that they want to go. So it's very important. I think it's a fantastic idea.
Super. All right. Well, see no other discussion. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay, motion carries. And then our second out-of-state travel, which we referenced in item 5, is the out-of-state travel for our Steubenville, Ohio, and Pittsburgh, Kansas staff to go and see SFA sites. And that would be 18 to 20 staff, and that'll be in January. I believe the time has not been nailed down
Right,
yet.
we're looking, we've targeted the Tuesday the 10th to Ohio and the 12th to Pittsburgh, but they're on break. And so we haven't been able to, they're both been very willing and accommodating. So we believe, but we don't want to make arrangements, obviously, until we know that it meets their scheduling. So that's, and as I mentioned earlier, the only other thing there, we were also thinking about potentially Arizona. That's off because they're not using SFA. I'll look into that, you know, but the Kansas one really parallels more some of our demographics. So one of the things we wanted to pick up was English language learners, and then that parallels, you know, kind of our mixture, our percentages.
Okay. Yes, Colin.
Yeah, I know there was some discussion about the Arizona one. Have we found out what the rationale was for not being in the SFA anymore? Was it due to, you know, cost? Did they feel that they've achieved what they wanted to achieve, so they've moved on? Have we been able to learn what their reasoning was for going away from the program as of yet?
I don't know that, you know, it came to my attention as we were working to make arrangements, you know, and so and again, they're on break, so it's,
yeah,
but I will, you know, because it's of interest to me, you know, just, that's not uncommon, just like we talked about,
right.
It could be different purposes, but, you know, we talked about Hawaii, you know, Hawaii was on SFA, they went to Wonders, their scores started flatlining and now they're going back. Same
right.
thing with Kansas, but I don't know. I'd be speculating. So I will follow up to report back to you.
Well, great. And yeah, I guess the reason that I really would like that information too is because there's probably going to be speculation as well. So this way, then, rather than just, you know, allow that speculation to take place, let's just find out and make it known. So
if I recall correctly, too, you know, it's a pretty significant site with, I think they have up to 50% or greater with English language learners. And so it's really a totally different environment. There could be all kinds of factors, you know, there that are beyond, you know, potentially when you're looking at poverty and you know, typically some of the challenges where, you know, kids have not been provided some opportunities. But again, I'll you know, see what I can find out to report back just so that we know.
But it'll be a good learning opportunity for us too. I think we've already learned a little bit with what Hawaii did, and obviously is now returning to SFA because they realized they left something good. But, you know, when did they leave? What were the reasons for? What were their scores beforehand? What are their scores now? how long ago was it? You know, this would be a good learning opportunity for us, to get some good information. So not all
Jamie,
a loss.
Jamie, one of the things that I would be interested in too with the Kansas trip is that they left and adopted a literacy program, right? I mean, it's kind of like the opposite of what we're looking to do. And we know that it's it was a school reform model, right? And so I'm really curious to see what they put in place when they got rid of SFA for all the other components. They adopted the literacy piece as well. Because I just find that interesting.
I'll spend quite a bit of time looking at all the different elements that have come up there. Probably not as much classroom visit time for me. It will be for the team, but I'll be digging into some of those other details while I'm there.
Okay.
You know, I'd also like to, you know, it's hard because we dug so deeply into this. Sometimes we forget some of the things that we have found out. One of the books that Stacy read that I shared with her, High Poverty, and I believe you also read that book. They were highlighting schools with high poverty and high success, suggesting that they're out there, folks, in terms of, you know, models to follow. And as I recall, they referenced that about half of the schools that they were highlighting were built off of a whole school reform platform. And again, it suggests the importance of systems and how things connect.
Okay.
The only thing,
Yes.
I'd like to add one more thing, just because it's coming directly out of the curriculum committee meeting. One of the things that Jamie has said she will do too, is that she'll be looking also into the IEP and special education component of SFA, because it's a very important part of that adoption and making sure we're meeting the needs for those kids. So that will be part of what she is addressing when she goes into those schools the next time too. So we've had a number of people asking us those questions,
and I would, you know, just adding to that, Kathy, a little bit, with in addition to what Katie brings to the table. Remember, Jamie was a special ed director too.
Right.
You know, so there is deep understanding about the importance of that service.
Yeah, and so it'll be great that she'll really look into it, make sure that those, you know, what SFA offers for those students.
Was Jeannie able to look into it when she went to Ohio?
I think she was more focused on classroom and
Okay.
stuff at that time, but now she's going to do like the deeper dive.
Do we have anybody, or maybe could she coordinate with Lance to have somebody, I don't know, you know what I mean? So they can get a look at that in Ohio as well too, while she's in jail. You know what I mean?
I believe we do have a special ed teacher on that trip. So
Okay.
we tried to diversify. We have some preschool teachers. We have some literacy specialists. We have, I believe there's 5 people that were on the literacy committee. We have administrators, myself. I believe there is a special ed teacher, but I don't want to promise that. I'd have to look at that list again.
Okay.
Thanks, Jamie.
Good.
Mhm.
How were the professionals selected? Was it just volunteer or?
We had them volunteer, and then we had to pare down a little bit.
Okay.
Meaning there was interest.
Well, Carrie wants to go, Jamie. He wants to be the board representative.
Yeah.
Perhaps when we go explore Hawaii.
Oh,
Yeah.
then
Oh, yeah.
Carrie
Hawaii,
can
send
go.
me for Hawaii.
So we have to vote on that
I
one.
don't know if the volcano is still active.
Right. All right. So if no other discussion, we have a first and a second to
Yep.
approve the SFA site visits to Steubenville and Pittsburgh. So all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, motion carries.
It's a pretty good budget for Kansas City.
Right, Kansas City barbecue. Okay, so other business, just a couple remarks. I just wanted to thank all of you for coming together this year, and also tonight. You know, I know it's an unplanned meeting, and so I appreciate everybody being here. And just to our district leaders and everybody, much deserved vacation coming up here, time off. So enjoy. And all our teachers and students, we hope that you have a great time off and you're just ready to get back, to come back to learning and stuff. And I think that's it. And any future meeting dates, I mean, we don't have any for the rest of the year unless something wild happens.
We have before the next meeting.
Oh, yeah, January 4th.
Yep, January 4th, we have, I believe, an executive committee meeting, and also before that, we are gonna do a, finance committee meeting.
So that, will that work by putting that 5:30, that meeting at 5:30 for the finance and then the exec after? That'll be fine?
Yeah, that's fine.
Great. Is just a heads up, I did want to mention some, because the meetings that we do have are coming up are relatively large, and so just in what their purpose and scope are, we are going to be discussing some of the referendum timelines coming up here. So on the 4th, we're going to be discussing the finance meeting at the finance meeting, and that's going to be our final referral to the general board. And that at the meeting on the 10th for the general meeting, that is when we will be voting on the referendum recommendation that would come out of finance, and we need to have that done by the 24th. I'm told. So those
So
are.
that might be a good meeting if you can make it to that finance committee meeting. It might be a good one to come to with some
It's the 4th.
questions on the 4th.
Yeah.
Okay, and is there a buildings and grounds set up at all for in
None
January?
that I
Yes,
know.
that you know. Okay, and then curriculum is always the third Thursday. Is that right?
So we're saying these days.
January.
We're kind of to be announced, to be determined these days.
Oh, okay,
Kind of
that's
working
fine.
out a real
Yeah.
schedule,
Okay.
but January 23rd ad hoc is meeting, the behavior group.
Okay,
I have
perfect.
that one down.
All right, great. Okay, well, if there's nothing else to come before the board, I'll look for a motion to adjourn
Motion is Merry Christmas.
in a second.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right, we are adjourned, 5:50.
Merry
Wow.
Christmas.
Merry Christmas, everybody. Have a good time
Everybody.
off.
All right.
Drive safe.
Stay warm, yeah.
Committee meetings have place.
So you'll be up.
Yeah. That's fine.
You have a lot.
I'm gonna go lock myself in my house.
Bye, drive safe, everybody.
Actually, I'm.